The fluorescent lights in the Atlanta airport bathroom hummed like angry wasps as I scrubbed my hands for the 47th time that shift. The soap dispenser gurgled empty, forcing me to use the rough industrial hand soap that left my knuckles cracked and bleeding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I whispered to myself, counting each circular scrub. 8 was the number. Always 8. Had to be 8. The water ran pink from my raw skin, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. The bags on Carousel 14 were contaminated. I could feel it. Every passenger who'd touched them, every handler who'd thrown them into cargo holds, every surface they'd contacted. The germs were crawling, multiplying, waiting to transfer to me, then to my family. My radio crackled to life. Hayes, where the hell are you? I've got passengers waiting on their luggage. My supervisor's voice barked through the static. I pressed the talk button with my elbow, not daring to contaminate my freshly washed hands. Coming. Just finishing up, I replied, my voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. Finishing up what? This is your 4th bathroom break in 2 hours, he shot back, irritation clear in his tone. The shame burned hotter than the scalding water. 4th? I'd lost count. Time meant nothing when the compulsions took over. I tried to turn off the faucet, then froze. If I touched the handle, I'd have to start over. My hands hovered inches from the metal, trembling violently. God, I whispered my first prayer in weeks. Help me. But God seemed as distant as he had for months. Ever since the thoughts started, ever since normal life became impossible. The bathroom door swung open with a metallic screech, and I instinctively turned my back, hiding my bleeding hands. Jacob, that you? A familiar voice called out. I recognized the speaker, Robert Simpson, the airport chaplain. Great. The last thing I needed was spiritual counseling when I couldn't even turn off a faucet. I'm fine, Pastor Simpson, I managed, still facing the mirror. Just washing up. Mind if I join you? His voice carried no judgment, just gentle warmth. Been on my feet all day. He moved to the sink beside me, turning on the water with quick, efficient movements. Normal movements. The kind I used to make before my brain broke. Your supervisor asked me to check on you, he said quietly, pumping soap into his palm. Says you've been struggling lately. I'm fine, I repeated, my hands still under the scalding stream. Jacob, his voice was firm but kind. Look at me. I wouldn't. I need to get back to work, I said, my voice shaking. Your hands are bleeding, he observed softly. The words hit like a physical blow. I glanced down at the pink water swirling down the drain, evidence of my madness written in blood and soap. How long? Robert asked, drying his hands with a single paper towel. How long what? I replied, but I knew what he meant. How long since you've been able to stop? He asked. My shoulders sagged as the truth poured out. 3 months, maybe 4, getting worse every day. I can't make it stop. Robert reached over and gently turned off my faucet. I flinched as if he'd struck me. Now you'll have to start over, I whispered, panic rising in my chest. No, he said firmly. Now we're going to walk out of this bathroom together, and you're going to tell me what's really going on. I can't touch the door handle, can't touch the bags, can't touch anything, I confessed, my voice cracking. The germs aren't the problem, Jacob, Robert interrupted, handing me a paper towel. Fear is 20 minutes later I sat in Robert's small office near the chapel, my hands wrapped in gauze he'd pulled from a first aid kit. The bleeding had stopped, but the anxiety hadn't. Every surface in the room seemed to pulse with invisible contamination. Tell me about your family, Robert said, settling behind his desk with a steaming cup of coffee. What about them? I asked, shifting uncomfortably in the chair. He waved a hand. Your wife, your kids. You mentioned them when we talked last week. A fresh wave of shame washed over me. Monica thinks I'm losing my mind. Can't say I blame her. I stared at my bandaged hands. And David, my 17-year-old son, he won't even talk to me anymore. Why not? Robert leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. I'd been avoiding this conversation for weeks, but Robert had a way of drawing truth from people. He's been acting out, staying out all night, drinking, running with the wrong crowd, I began, my voice growing hollow. Last month I found drugs in his room. Marijuana, pills, other stuff. What did you do? He asked gently. What any father would do. I confronted him, tried to set boundaries. I took a shaky breath. But every time I reached for him, every time I tried to hug him or discipline him, all I could think about was contamination. Where he'd been, what he'd touched, who he'd been with. I whispered. Robert nodded slowly. So you pulled away. I couldn't help it. The thoughts just took over. He needed his father, and I was too busy washing my hands to be there for him. Where is he now? Robert asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. The question I'd been dreading. Gone. Packed a bag 3 weeks ago and left. Said he was tired of living with a father who was too crazy to even touch his own son. The words hung between us like a death sentence. I buried my face in my hands, careful not to touch the gauze. That's when the washing got worse, I admitted. When I realized I'd failed him. Failed as a father, as a man, as a Christian. Robert was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Do you remember the story of the lost sheep? Of course, I replied automatically. The shepherd leaves the 99 to find the one. Tell me what that means to you now. Pastor Simpson pressed. I wanted to give him the textbook response, but the words stuck in my throat. Honestly, right now it feels like I'm the sheep that's so damaged, so covered in thorns and filth, that even the shepherd wouldn't want to touch me. And David? David's the sheep I was supposed to protect, and I drove him away instead. My voice broke. Some shepherd I turned out to be. Robert stood and walked to his bookshelf, pulling out a worn Bible. Mind if I read something? I shrugged, too exhausted to object. We all like sheep have gone astray, each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He read aloud. Isaiah 53:6. Sounds about right. We've all gone astray, I said bitterly. But that's not the end of the verse, Jacob. The Lord has laid our iniquity on him, on Jesus. All of it, your fear, your compulsions, your failures as a father. Jesus has already carried it. Then why can't I stop washing my hands? The question came out sharper than intended. Why can't I touch my own son? If Jesus carried it all, why am I still drowning? Robert set the Bible down and looked me in the eye. Because you're trying to be your own shepherd. And sheep make terrible shepherds. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed against the desk. Unknown number. I almost ignored it but needed a break from Pastor Simpson's questions and answered. Hello? I said cautiously. Dad? The voice was slurred, distant. David. David. Where are you? Are you okay? I shot to my feet, nearly knocking over my chair. I'm in trouble, Dad. Real trouble, he mumbled, his words running together. I need help. My heart stopped. What kind of trouble? Where are you? Downtown, near the old warehouse district. I think I took something bad. My friends, they just left me here. I can't feel my legs right. The phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands. I'm coming. Stay on the line. Don't hang up. Dad? His voice was getting weaker. I'm sorry. About everything. About what I said. Don't apologize. Just stay with me. I'm coming, I said, looking at Robert with terror and desperation warring in my chest. He's overdosed. He needs an ambulance. Robert was already moving, phone in hand. Give me the location, he said, dialing 911. As I relayed David's approximate position to Robert, who passed it to the dispatcher, my mind raced. The warehouse district was 20 minutes away in traffic. The ambulance would be faster, but what if they couldn't find him? What if he collapsed before help arrived? What if I lost him forever? Pain lanced my heart. Help me, Jesus. I can't fail my son. Not again. I have to go, I announced, running to the door. Jacob. Wait, Robert grabbed my arm. You're in no condition to drive. Let me take you. No time. I was already moving toward the door, then stopped. The door handle. I couldn't touch it. My hands hovered inches away, shaking violently. The seconds ticked by. David was dying somewhere in the city, and I couldn't even leave a room. He's my son, I whispered, staring at the handle like it was a venomous snake. Yes, he is, Robert said, stepping beside me. And you're going to save him. But first you have to trust Jesus, the Good Shepherd. I don't know how anymore, I confessed. Then let me show you. Robert reached for the handle, then paused. What if I told you that touching this door handle, even with your bare hands, could never separate you from God's love? What if I told you that even if you got sick, even if you died, nothing could pluck you from the shepherd's hand? I'd say you don't understand OCD, I replied, wishing he'd hurry and save the sermon for later. And I'd say you don't understand grace of Christ. His hand rested on the handle. Your son is out there because he's lost, not because you failed to be perfect. And the same shepherd who's calling you to save David is the one who's been pursuing you through every bathroom, every compulsion, every sleepless night. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Dad, I can't stay awake much longer. I have to go, I said, more to myself than to Robert. Yes, you do, he agreed quietly. I closed my eyes and reached for the handle. My fingertips brushed the cold metal, and every instinct screamed at me to pull back, to run to the nearest sink, to scrub until the contamination was gone. Instead, I gripped the handle and pulled. The door opened, and I didn't die. The world didn't end. The germs didn't consume me. For the first time in months, I walked through a door without washing my hands. The warehouse district looked like something from a post-apocalyptic movie. Broken windows stared down at us from abandoned buildings, and trash littered the streets like urban tumbleweeds. Robert had insisted on driving, and I was grateful. My hands were shaking too badly to grip a steering wheel. There, I pointed to a figure huddled against a loading dock. That's him. Robert pulled over, and I was out of the car before it stopped moving. David lay crumpled against a concrete wall, his face pale and his breathing shallow. A needle and several empty vials lay scattered nearby. "David," I called out, dropping to my knees beside him. My hands hovered over his body. He needed help, medical attention, comfort, human touch. But all I could think about was where he'd been, what he'd injected, what diseases might be in his blood. "Dad," his eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied, my voice breaking. "I'll always come for you. I'm dirty, Dad. Don't touch me. You'll get sick," he mumbled, his words slurring together. The words hit me like a physical blow. In his delirium, David was protecting me from the very thing I feared most: contamination. My own son was more concerned about my phobias than his own life. "I don't care," I said, and meant it. I reached out and pulled David into my arms, feeling his weight against my chest. His clothes were filthy, his skin clammy with sweat and whatever substances he'd been using. Every germ, every contaminant I'd been avoiding for months was now pressed against me. And for the first time since the compulsions began, I felt peace. "I've got you," I whispered into his hair. "I've got you, and I'm never letting go." David's head lolled against my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. No more apologies. You're my son, my sheep, and I'm bringing you home," I said firmly. The ambulance arrived in a blur of lights and sirens. The paramedics took over, their movements quick and professional as they loaded David onto a stretcher and started an IV. As they worked, one of them turned to me. "Are you the father?" the paramedic asked. "Yes," I answered, without hesitation. "He's going to be okay. Overdose, but we caught it in time. You probably saved his life by getting here so fast," she explained, checking David's vital signs. As the ambulance pulled away, Robert and I stood alone in the empty street. My clothes were stained, my hands were dirty, and I could feel every contaminant David had transferred to me. "How do you feel?" Robert asked quietly. I took inventory. No compulsions, no racing thoughts about germs and disease, no overwhelming need to find the nearest sink. "Like a father," I said, pride filling my heart where fear had reigned for months. "And," he prompted. I looked down at my hands, still bandaged, still dirty, but somehow clean in a way that had nothing to do with soap and water. "Like a sheep who just heard his shepherd's voice," I replied. 6 months later, I stood at the front of our church, looking out at the congregation during testimony time. David sat in the front row next to Monica, 90 days clean and working through his own recovery program. His journey wasn't over, neither was mine, but we were walking it together now. "Some of you know I've been struggling with mental illness," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, to be specific. For months, I couldn't touch anything without washing my hands until they bled. I couldn't hug my wife, couldn't touch my son, couldn't do my job. I paused, meeting David's eyes. He nodded encouragingly. I thought God had abandoned me, thought my faith was weak, my prayers weren't good enough, my spiritual life wasn't strong enough to overcome mental illness. I gripped the podium, a gesture that would have been impossible 6 months ago. I was wrong. A few people in the congregation shifted uncomfortably. Mental health wasn't a popular topic in our church, but it needed to be discussed. The night my son overdosed, I had to make a choice. I could let my fear control me, or I could trust the Good Shepherd to lead me through the valley. I chose trust, and when I reached out to save my son, Jesus reached out to save me, I continued, my voice growing stronger. David wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I still take medication for my OCD. I still see a therapist every week. Some days are harder than others, but I've learned that healing doesn't always look like we expect it to. Sometimes the shepherd leads us through paths of righteousness, and sometimes he walks with us through dark valleys that seems like death. Either way, he's with us." I opened my Bible to Psalm 23. David wrote, He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. I used to think that meant God would take away all my problems, make my life peaceful and easy. But I've learned something different. The quiet waters aren't a place, they're a presence. Even in the chaos, even in the fear, even when your mind is screaming lies, there's a still small voice calling us to rest in His promises. My voice grew stronger as I continued. 3 weeks ago I was baptized again, not because my first baptism wasn't real, but because I needed to publicly declare that Jesus is Lord over every part of my life, including my mental illness. I needed to go under the water and come up clean, not because of anything I did, but because of everything He did. I looked directly at David. I'm not a perfect father. I'm not a perfect Christian. I'm a sheep who went astray and a shepherd who failed his flock. But I serve a Savior who specializes in lost causes and broken people. The congregation was silent, hanging on every word. If you're struggling with mental illness, you're not alone. If you've failed as a parent, you're not disqualified. If your faith feels weak, join the club. Jesus didn't come for the healthy, He came for the sick. He didn't come for the found, He came for the lost, I declared, my voice echoing through the sanctuary. I closed my Bible and stepped closer to the congregation. Some of you are drowning in fear, just like I was. Some of you have children who are lost, just like David was. Some of you feel too dirty, too broken, too contaminated for God to love. You're wrong. My voice broke as I continued. The same shepherd who found me in an airport bathroom, who gave me courage to save my son, who restored my family and my faith, He's calling your name too. He's leading you beside still waters. All you have to do is follow His voice. I extended my hands toward the congregation, hands that 6 months ago I couldn't use to touch a door handle, now reaching out an invitation. If you want to know this Jesus, if you want to experience His quiet waters in your storm, come forward. Don't wait until you're clean enough or good enough or strong enough. Come as you are, I invited. The altar call lasted 20 minutes. 12 people came forward, including a young woman whose hands I noticed were raw and cracked from excessive washing. As I prayed with her, placing my hands gently on her shoulders, I thought about the shepherd who had pursued me through every compulsion, every failure, every moment of despair. Jesus, I prayed aloud, this is your daughter. She's struggling with the same fear that held me captive. Show her your quiet waters. Lead her beside still streams. Restore her soul like you restored mine. The woman began to weep. I can't stop washing, she whispered. It's been 3 years. I can't stop. You don't have to stop today, I replied gently. You just have to believe Jesus is your shepherd, and you lack nothing. He meets all of your needs. As that truth said, the battle is always the Lord's, not yours. Jesus will lead you to healing, one step at a time. After the service, David and I walked to the church parking lot together. For the first time in over a year, I put my arm around his shoulders without a second thought. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said quietly, for your testimony, for getting help, for saving my life. Jesus saved both of us, I replied. Once we got out of the way and surrendered everything to Him, life changed. Resting in His promises makes all the difference. We stood there in comfortable silence, father and son, 2 sheep who had been found by the same good shepherd. In the distance, a fountain bubbled quietly in the church courtyard, still waters that reflected the afternoon sun. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the fear, the compulsions, the broken relationships, the overdose, the healing. None of it had been easy, but all of it had been necessary. You know what I learned? I asked David as we reached our car. What's that? He replied, opening the passenger door. The Good Shepherd doesn't just lead us beside still waters, sometimes He has to carry us there. I looked at my son, clean, healthy, alive, and sometimes He uses broken sheep like us to rescue other sheep who are lost. David smiled. Sounds like he's got a sense of humor. And a lot of grace, I added, running my clean hands through my hair without a trace of anxiety. As we drove home, I silently thanked Jesus for never letting go of us, even when we couldn't hold on to Him. The quiet waters weren't a destination, they were a relationship, and in that relationship, the lost sheep had found their way home. In the distance, church bells rang out across the city, calling the lost to come home. And in a small car driving through traffic, 2 found sheep smiled and headed toward still waters, grateful for a shepherd who specializes in impossible rescues and unlikely redemptions. Epilogue. 1 year later, I received a letter at the airport chaplain's office where I now volunteer part-time. The return address was from a treatment center in California. Dear Jacob, you don't know me, but I was in your church service last year when you shared your testimony about OCD and faith. I was the woman with the raw hands who came forward during the altar call. I wanted you to know that your story saved my life. I'd been planning to kill myself that very night because I couldn't stop the compulsions, couldn't stop the washing, couldn't stop the fear. But hearing you talk about finding Jesus in the midst of mental illness, not despite it, gave me hope. I've been in treatment for 8 months now. It's hard work, but I'm getting better. More importantly, I've learned that Jesus loves me even when my brain doesn't work right. I've learned that faith and therapy can work together. I've learned that healing is my gift from my loving Savior. I'm getting baptized next month. I wanted to thank you for showing me that broken people can still be beloved by God. Your sister in Christ, Michelle. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my Bible next to Psalm 23. David, now 18 months clean and working as a peer counselor at a recovery center, often helped me respond to letters like this. Another one? David asked, looking up from the desk where he was organizing pamphlets about addiction recovery. Another one, I confirmed, showing him the letter. God's still using our story. That's chill, Dad, he said with a smile. Who would have thought that our worst moments could become someone else's hope? Jesus thinks in ways we can't imagine, I replied, tucking the letter away safely. The Good Shepherd, it seemed, was still in the business of using broken sheep to find other lost sheep. And in the quiet waters of His grace, there was always room for one more. As I prepared for my weekly therapy appointment, yes, I still needed professional help, and yes, that was okay. I whispered a prayer of gratitude for a shepherd who had pursued me through every bathroom, every compulsion, every moment of despair. He had led me beside still waters, He had restored my soul, and He was teaching me, day by day, how to dwell in His house forever.